Hello, beautiful souls. Week 18. Here we go. So, today I'm going to bring the inner child in. Understanding our inner child is really powerful because it lives within us, okay? I'm going to refer to my notes here just so that you guys can get a feel into that space as well, because it's kind of something I've journaled along my way. And it's really important to see how our inner child works throughout our life because, again, all our subconscious programming, right, was done while we were mainly a child, up to the age of 7. So that inner child and how that child was really reflects a lot of what we do as an adult. Some people refer to it as the wounded child, but I kind of try and just say the inner child, okay? There is going to be wounding and trauma stored from our inner child in there, okay? Because even if you didn't have a traumatic childhood, something as simple as saying having a blankie, right? And you love this blankie and you were 8 years old riding on the ride-on lawnmower with dad and something happened, you dropped it, got sucked up in the machine and chewed into bits. That would be traumatic for a child, right? So sometimes the littlest things can be quite traumatic. And so we need to understand that whether you have had a lot of trauma in your life or not, everybody's inner child has got some trauma stored. But I don't like to refer to it as a wounded child, right? Because that child just needs some love and nurturing. Needs to be seen, heard, feel love, right? Isn't that what all children do? Want is to be seen, heard, loved, nourished, fed, made feel safe. So how does your inner child reflect in you as an adult? A lot of the time as we get older, even in our teenage years, we start to squash our inner child down. Those moments when we wanted to be free and giggly and dance and look at the world with these open, beautiful, curious eyes, right? We never wanted to sit on the swings because our friends might have judged us. Or, we started squashing our creative side down. So understanding how powerful this little inner child is for you, because it's our creative sense. It's seeing the world with open eyes, right? It's our fun. It's that freedom to express ourselves and be seen. It's innocence, right? Little children have less attachment to judgment. They learn that over time. So we want to go back to that place of where we had no judgment, where we were just free, happy, singing and skipping and dancing and jumping in the puddles, right? There's streaks of that in all of us. So going back to think about our inner child is really important because our inner child is a lot of the time the essence, sometimes that we've lost. So what did your inner child love? Who was that inner child? Really start to look at her or him and see how that inner child used to behave. I mean, every inner child has little tantrums, right? That's natural. And still as adults, sometimes we have those tantrums come up now, right? That's our inner child, not understanding. Sometimes they need to understand. They need things to be explained to them. Need to be more open and, open to seeing things into bigger perspectives, right? It's only that when they don't understand that they usually, or don't feel like they're being heard, or, maybe it's getting their way and sometimes their significance or that kind of thing or selfishness might play power in this. So what was that little child like? What did it love to do? And this is going to be really powerful for you to journal and start seeing. Does your inner child love bright color things? Does it love to be in nature? Does it love to play at the park and giggle? Does it like hide and seek? Like, I love that I have children because it's bringing back my inner child and I get to do those things and feel enjoyment in those simplest places. Get on the swing and swing freely and, skip. Me and my son skip into the shops, right? If I was skipping on my own, people might smile. Some people would judge me. Doesn't matter. But doing with my children, I can get away with it easily, right? But I've actually learned to embrace that part of myself. If that's what I feel like I need, I do it. So don't let anyone squash you down because we're older and telling us that we shouldn't behave in certain ways. I mean, there's some childish behaviors that, yes, adults shouldn't necessarily do, but having fun and being free and skipping and being that inner child and being playful and innocent and fun, let it be, right? Sometimes that inner child has got these archetypes of, whether it wanted to be the little princess or the little farm boy, right? Those are archetypes, and that we would role play those things. And through our days as we get as adults, like I find some days I am in a really girly mood. Other days I'm a little bit more like the diva or the sassy queen, right? So understanding that that comes into our inner child and embracing the archetype, right? But then, whether we need that expression as an adult too, right? So it allows us to be a little bit more free. So see how this inner child plays in you. So the inner child is basically an aspect within your unconscious mind. It reflects the child we were in both her positive and her negative, or him. Sorry, so I'll just say her because I'm reflecting to me. But if you're a male watching this, step into your him, of course. It's our unneeded needs that were suppressed, right? It's the childhood emotions. It's our innocence. It's a natural enthusiasm for life, the creativity. It's basically what is waiting within us, right? And that's that fun. That's that playfulness. Sometimes we wear masks to get our needs met. So as children, right, some children find that they have to act out, or they have to be significant to get noticed, right? And so these can be learnt behaviors. So have a feel into that. Does your inner child need to be significant? Does it need to show a lot of affection to get cuddles? Does it have to do well at things to get noticed, or does it have to misbehave? Usually one of the biggest things that we felt we needed or were lacking as a child becomes one of our biggest values as an adult. And when I say values, something that we hold important and we implement into our lives as an adult, right? So wherever your needs were not met really greatly, you will actually find that that has a great effect as to how you play out your adult life. So what needs weren't met? Sometimes we don't really even realize that, right? So the inner child can carry a lot of sadness or abandonment, anger and trauma. But again, it contains a lot of, playfulness and innocence and so many awesome other characters as well. So see what that inner child, my two boys born by the same parents, are very different. Right? So were you artistic? Did you love to be on the bike or outdoors or playing in the mud? Were you one of those people that love to build things? Or did you like to play Barbies? Were you nurturing? Have a look at how you acted as a child. It's really important to see this. So connecting into your inner child focuses and brings light to our consciousness, our programming, our patterns, the aspects that we lost and could have developed into our full expression, right? So sometimes they're squashed, or sometimes we wore masks because of things that were going on in our lives, that we were told not to act a certain way, or it was just the patterns and habits of how we got accepted, right? So sometimes we acted out to get more more noticed. Sorry. People pleasing comes from our inner child, right? So I became a people pleaser. And I was always really worrying about what other people thought. So I was always putting other people's needs before my own. And this is really, really harmful in its own, because we don't express our own needs and desires. So when I reflected in this space and see how it plays out, a lot of the time for, say, women, when we go on a date for the first time and a guy will say, what would we like to do? And we have ideas, we might want to go to a beach, or we want them to do something romantic, and but then we kind of leave it open for them because we want to people please. We want them to make that decision, and they can't read our minds. So speak what we want. Tell them, right? So, and I've seen this play out for myself and in lots of areas in my life, how I was a people pleaser. So were you? And sometimes we don't even know where we got that from. If I was people pleasing, I was being liked. I always wanted to be accepted. So have a look at how those things are playing out in you. Also, things that we need to look at is our unworthiness, lack of feeling like we are worthy of owning things, right? That there's so often that we went to a shop and we'd be like, I want that toy. And our parents are like, no, you can't have that. right? So looking at those spaces, because really a little child feels that they can have everything. They have abundance. They don't believe that they are, can't have things for whatever reasons. So where did you start feeling that you were abundant, that you were not worthy of having everything your heart desires? Right? It's not always about the material things, but truly what our heart desires. Like a child's just, their needs, they want these things, right? So really have a look at that space. Where do you feel you lost your identity? Where are you shutting things down or needed more? There's good and bad in this little inner child, right? And it's really reflecting on this space. The inner child is like an echo of the child you once were, right? So the habits, the patterns, but the old expression is there. The original expression sits in that child. It just needs to be nurtured again, accepted and told it's safe to be that. And you as that adult can give it that. Right? And sometimes it just needs to gain trust in that space, be witnessed and heard, been told it's okay. So your inner child work is like a process where you're recontacting that child. You're gaining understanding, you're embracing and healing the little child, making it feel safe, comfortable, free to express, giving it the confidence that it needed. The inner child represents the first original self, right? And then the inner child then gets transformed through the parenting, society, schooling, all these things, right? So we want to try and eventually come back to that original child, that original expression you were born to be. And that's when you're going to come into self-reflection of what that child really, really loved. Who was that child? And I was naturally a neat and organised child. Mum would say I was always like that. That's, definitely a stem that runs in me now as an adult. We also look at the things around, like, say, our sexuality. A lot of times we were ashamed or we weren't able to express our sexuality as we came into this place. Parents didn't always talk to us in depth about that place, make us feel comfortable to touch our body. Like it was like, oh, don't do that. You shouldn't do this, right? We were game to shame ourselves. We were even game to shame ourselves if we wanted to pick our nose, right? Oh, that's gross. Don't do that, right? But it's part of your body, yeah? Touching yourself is natural. A dog or a cat licks its body, doesn't stop and go, oh, I'm being shamed or someone's watching me. I mean, there is things that are appropriate in certain environments. So I'm not saying, go and do something that is going to create issues for you. But for yourself, loving yourself, feeling comfortable with your own body and what your body needs in that moment. Like if I got a booger in my nose and it needs to come out, why is that gross? Unless I'm like wiping and don't go wash my hands and I'm being hygienic around that space, right? Yes, if you can get a tissue, use a tissue, right? Definitely. I'm not saying not. But I'm talking about even then touching our body, feeling comfortable with our body and what our body needs. We so often look for others to provide, fill our desires. We don't even know what our own body needs. So this is connecting us back to ourselves as well. Being able to explore yourself. So explore your body and explore you. Explore your original essence. And a little child did that. They touched parts of themselves originally and it was just an exploration, right? So I'm not saying this and go and do any sexual things to yourselves, but I'm just trying to give you guys an understanding of how a little child see in ourselves. They were curious at first. They were curious about what their fingers did and they didn't control them properly. They were curious about why things came out of certain areas, right? They wanted to know, oh, that tickles and oh, that doesn't feel so nice. Before we were shamed and judged for being anything at all. Before we were told or created masks. Before we wanted to please everyone to get attention or hide ourselves, right? So we just need to build a relationship with this inner child. Sit there and reflect on memories as a child. Really good to go back and find some photos of you as a child. And this was one of the tasks that's going to come up. But go and look at those moments, because sometimes that allows those emotions and connection to your inner child to come up again. Ask your parents, what were you like as a really young child? Can they tell you more? Can grandparents tell you more? Do you need to sit there and daydream? Imagine yourself as a little kid right now and look around. You know, what would the kids go and do? They go and smell the flowers. They would roll around in the grass. They would admire the clouds and see what shapes they could find. They would daydream. Their dreams were reality to them. They would daydream of being a princess, or being the king, right? Or being the fireman, being that dancer on stage and that singer, and, you know, and they would walk around the house and we would sing and we would dance. We were free to be us till we were told not to be, or we felt that we were being judged, or we wanted to fit in, or all those things. Again, so go back and try and be that little child. See how freeing it is to explore and express yourself as you need to be. So it's building that relationship. So what does she need to be heard? Does she need to feel particular things like safety or security or love? Does she need to be seen? Does she feel like the family was too big and she just wasn't noticed? What does that child need? What would it daydream about? We just spoke about that. When someone would ask you as a child, when you grow up, what would you want to be? So when did you stop dreaming about what you want to be? When did you think that you did not have the ability to be that? Right? So start connecting to that inner child. Let your dreams start to be creative. Let them flow so you can actually see what you want in your life right now. What was the favorite activity this little child wanted to do? What was its favorite subject at school, or favorite sport? What was it fascinated by? Curious. You know, one of my sons loves building, is really curious about that. Comes to school reading and doesn't want to know anything about it, right? I was the same. I didn't like reading. I loved art. I loved singing and dancing. I loved being seen. I loved being a bit, flirty and, cheeky, and, that was natural. But, at some stage we're taught not to be certain things, right? That's not right. Who tells you it's not right? Because you can be your fullest expression. And again, this is really just connecting into the inner child. Living at the person that little girl wanted to be. When you spend time with children, how do you feel? And what kind of things do you want to do? If you did colouring in, what colours did you used to love to use? Or if you went to draw and colour in something now, what would you be drawn to? What colours do you love to wear now? If you could just spend hours just playing, what things would you go and play? You may even want to do the reparenting with the inner child, right? So you can learn what to be a healthy relationship could be, right? For forgiveness and acceptance, right? So when I'm saying doing the parenting, you could imagine just having the child in front of you. And we're going to go through a task like this later, right? So do the reparenting with this child. What did that little child need? And allow it to be that, because that's, as you're going to allow a little bit more freedom and understanding and compassion. So again, I explained that as a children, whatever we didn't get, we polarize as an adult. Our parents were always meant well. Most parents did anyway. Not all, but most parents meant well. They did their best with what they had and what they knew, right? So sometimes giving forgiveness and compassion, like I'm not perfect as a mother, but I do my best, okay? And giving forgiveness. I didn't understand when I was a child that, the things my mum was doing, that she was doing her absolute best. And I was very honoured to have amazing parents like I did. Sometimes parents were beaten as children themselves, and that's what they were taught, right? That they weren't heard or seen as well as little kids. Sometimes their inner child is just really hurt. So having some compassion around that, and I'm not saying that if the kids as a child that you were traumatically hurt or beaten or anything like that, that it was okay. I'm not saying that at all. But do we actually know what happened to them in their inner child as well? And we sometimes don't. We don't understand the whole situation that made them the way they are. So it's hard to have a lot of blame and judgment when we really don't know the whole story. And again, I'm not saying it's okay. But for us to forgive, we need to let go of things, right? And it's not condoning those behaviors, but letting go of the energetic charges that we hold on ourselves that hinder us from moving forward. That we stay as a victim to that situation, and we don't want to. It's time to let go. It's time to heal all parts of ourselves, and that's our inner child. For whatever it was. And like I said, I was lucky to have a good upbringing and really supportive parents. And they weren't perfect, but either am I as a parent, and I do my best, and I know they did their best. And my dad definitely didn't have, had a really rough start to his life. Really tough. But he ended up with great adopted parents, and he did his best for me. Right? So what was your relationship with your mother and father like? So these are things that are really important to also look at, okay? What did it look like? How did it feel? Do your thoughts drift to good times, or do they dwell on the bad? Okay, because this is things that this inner child is holding on to. Did we feel a lot of disappointment to that childhood and, not getting our needs met? And this is what they class as mummy and daddy wounding, right? Our inner child has got wounding held by stuff that comes from our parents. So, again, we need to let that go. We're not condoning the behavior, but start to see and relive that inner child in its fullest expression, in its happiness. I don't necessarily want to drag us through the trauma, but letting go of and forgiving the parts of ourselves of where shaming may have came up, where the masks may have came up. Where can we peel those parts of ourselves back to find that beautiful, innocent, beautiful, happy, free, loving, spirited child again? And this is what the segment's about. Sometimes we're going to uncover some dirt so we can forgive and heal those parts of ourselves. And that's going to be really important. So your self-esteem, comparing, competing, sabotaging, weak boundaries, the lack of being selfish or selfless. A lot of this codependence or our inability to be able to speak up, sacrificing our dreams, our needs, for permission from others, right? Sometimes we witness this with our parents. Sometimes we became that. We learnt actually to do that, and that was what was normal. Or sometimes we became the polarized opposite of that, right? So having a look at that, I see quite often it happens that a parent was really selfless. They gave their children's needs were everything, right? They gave up their dreams, right? They gave up everything for their children. And then the children can be quite selfish. So they put all their needs first, right? So this is where it comes into how do we find a healthy balance in both of that? And this is where this program is for me, is finding that balance between being selfish and selfless. Not polarizing to one, but having both to fill our cup and give to those that we love. Be there and supportive of them, but if our cup is empty, we can't give to them. Showing our children that we can live out our dreams, be ourselves, and in our expression, in our beautifulness, right? So by showing them that, we allow them to be that too. So have a look at that space and see, was your mum selfless or selfish? My mum definitely gave up everything for us kids. She will still to this day put most of our needs before her own, right? And the problem with this is that when we give up everything, sometimes that builds up within us. Not always, I'm not saying my mum lashes out or anything, but that need, like when we want something and we're not getting those desires met, but we're not speaking out, sometimes we start to speak them out and then we're not heard, right? People are not respecting our boundaries, and eventually that's like the building up, and eventually we explode or we become really depressed. So as I explained earlier in one of the units, that when we give up our values and ourself, we create voids within ourselves, which leads to depression. So to find ourselves and find our expression and find what we love and what makes us happy, and singing and dancing and being free and whatever those things are for you, is what's going to bring you back into happiness and being that beautiful self again. Because you were born beautiful. You were born perfect as you are. So we need to go back and find those parts of ourselves that we've let go of, hidden and lost. So they're really not lost. They're still there. We just need to go back and review them. So looking at our boundaries again, this, where, and looking at, did our parents have no boundaries? A lot of the time, we're going to talk about in another subject, the masculine and feminine energies that runs throughout all of us. We both have that within us. So if we're a really nurturing mother energy, the light feminine, her boundaries can be quite weak. And the dark masculine has strong and powerful boundaries, right? And so when we are out of balance in one, we polarize to the other. So your children will act out. If your boundaries are not strong, they're going to push those boundaries all the time. But you still want to be nurturing and allow them to be able to create expression and strength about what their needs are, not squashed, right? So where do we find that balance, and how did that happen within our own upbringing? Sometimes even then, an example I heard one day is, this isn't my story, but a little boy was actually, his dad was hammering something in, and the little boy's like, I'd love to try and do that. And dad was like, yeah, of course. He wanted to show him, and he was hammering away, and the dad showed him how to do it, was hammering away, and the little boy went to do it, and as he did it, he missed and hit his thumb, right? And got all upset, and he idolized his dad, so he never felt that he could fill those shoes. Coming back to those moments that he just felt that he could not do what his dad could do. His dad never put him down, saying you were silly or you didn't listen or anything like that. But a child can polarize the events in their mind because they're, and that's just natural. So sometimes we polarize stuff and events in our lives that weren't as dramatic as they were. That little child seen those things as very dramatic, or idolized someone, didn't put them on a pedestal and never felt that they could live up to that, or always felt they had big shoes to fill, right? So there's lots of different aspects that can come into this inner child. So have a look at that. Look at those expressions of yourself and start reflecting on how that went with your parents. What was it like growing up in your family? Was there lots of love and connection, and were you open to express yourself? Was there honesty? What was going on and like I said again, even if all those things are the most beautiful situations, a child can still polarize things. I still had lack of worthiness and still was people pleasing, and which meant I didn't put my own boundaries and needs first for a long time. But that doesn't mean we're all different. So this is where an individual analysis is really important. So remembering where we are as needy as our unmet needs, right? So where we have so many unmet needs, we have a huge needing, a lack. So we feel like we got to fill that. So how do you fill those needs within yourself? Because you are your own controller now, and you can fulfill those things. So now let's just reflect on the inner child. Inner child could walk in the rain, jump in the puddles, swing on the swings, skip and dance, right? Pull faces. I do it all the time with my kids, right? We pull faces. We smelt the flowers. We changed our mind. I want to do that. No, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do this. Right? We changed our mind. We played in the sand. We built things. We got creative. We admired things. We admired the stars, the moon. Today, my kids are driving to school in kindy. We're looking at the clouds, admiring it, admiring the rainbow, seeing the beauty around us. They were curious. What does that do? Why does that happen? Are you still being curious around you? Are you being open? Or you boxed in with beliefs and what society or things, or maybe it relates to your values, great. But are you being open to being able to see more, be more? Are you curious? Said the singing and dancing, of course. Kissing and hugging, right? And so we commonly will kiss and hug someone we love. Kids walked off and kissed and hugged animals. They would hug the trees. They would kiss the flower they love, right? They were free to just express that beautifulness. They would laugh and cry at the same time, right? They were free to be, giggling and having fun. They laughed at their farts. My children do that all the time. It's a household joke here. Right? They pretend to be asleep. They allowed themselves to be weird and dress up, right? And be unique. They said sorry. They let things go. They disliked things. They might think things are stupid occasionally too, right? That's an inner child. Maybe it's just that they have no awareness around that, and that is the adult part of yourself can bring awareness. Allow them to explore it in a more curious way. We're not shunning them, we are helping them evolve and see more curious and be more free. They would hum and just make beautiful noises. Goodness, my kids can make some crazy noises at times, right? So, making noises. They speak to animals. They speak to the butterflies in the trees. My kids, like I said, seeing the shapes in the clouds this morning, and they see shapes in the trees. They do something they've never seen before. They were creative. They would take a nap. They'd be a superhero. I embrace superhero energy all the time. I love my princess energy too, right? They would read a book under the blankets. Or sit under the stars. Sleep somewhere different. Skip rules. Why do we have to go A, B, C? Why can't we go from A to C? Unless B is an important rule, right? Sometimes you can do things in a faster version. Sometimes that we're given instructions, and do we have to stick to everything? Because I tell you what, a lot of my healing work and modalities, I've just taken pieces of the puzzles and made my own. Being creative. That's how all this stuff was made in the first place. Those instructions and things were made from creation, right? Usually rules and instructions are so people can be really straight and down the line and but yes, I'm not saying that some rules and instructions are important, right? They are. But can we skip some sometimes? Kids do. They smile at a stranger. They say hi to everybody. They want to save the world. They think they can save the world. And so can you. They want to be someone else for the day. And sometimes I wake up and I feel like I'm in a different energy of the day, right? I do have a different expression. They order the biggest ice cream with all the flavors. They try different things together. Sometimes we're a bit okay, but my kids want to try different flavors together. And I'm like, right, honey and cheese with mayonnaise. They might add some interesting textures together, flavors together. So again, they explore life. They feel prosperous. They don't see why they can't have it all. And we do have abundance when we believe in it. The world, they look at the world with open eyes. Not through a narrow-minded little hole. Not through a little keyhole. They're seeing it, the big version. They're like, wow, look at this place. Abundance. And they feel and ask for everything. It's all about the needs and wants, their significance. We talked about this a little bit before. They might be seeking attention. They just want connection, right? They want to be seen and heard and adored. They might be girly or boy, like, you know. They want to be admired and loved. What was your confidence like as a kid? And were you independent or codependent, right? I have one really independent child and one that was a little bit more codependent, one that did get fearful when mummy was leaving, and one that was like, yep, see ya, you know, and that's sometimes, you know, naturally there in a child, right? What did you love? Were you gifted? Were you intuitive? I was, and I shut that down as a young kid. So I was very intuitive, and I bring that back on board now. So we all have gifts. We all have a clear sense. Do you know what your clear sense is? Have you ever investigated that? Have you ever tried and played in that space? Right? Because our clear senses are really powerful. So what is it? What was that in that child? I had a really strong inner knowing, claircognizance, and still do. And allowed their imagination to be dreamlike, that there was a fairy tale life, and that all the wildest dreams, and I've expressed this already, they wanted to do things spontaneous. Like, let's just do that now. Why can't we do that now? They're authentic. They're not born with fear, other than, kids are only fear of the drop, like they get a startle motion, right? We gain fear and judgment. They like to be authentic. My little boy the other day went out of the house wearing a leather jacket, like it's a, vinyl leather, putting a white tie with skull patterns on it over the top. And then he had like cargo army style pants on, and decided he's going to wear the brightest yellow slippers with sunglasses on, had to put his hat on and wear his sunnies for the day. My oldest is like, Mum, he looks weird. And I'm like, let him be. He's a kid. Let him be. He's enjoying himself. He loves it. He feels cool. A lot of people would comment and stop and smile at him, and right? So a lot of adults see the innocence in that. When was the last time you act childish? When I say childish too, some people think straight away it's like a tanty. But when did you giggle and play and do spontaneous and jump in the waves, right? Jump off the edge of the pool and do a bomb. Just be childlike in the moment. When did you believe in magic? Because I believe in magic. Magic happens everywhere. Magical experiences come to me daily, right? When did you stop believing in magic? Did you always try hard, or were you always wanting someone to answer the questions for you? It was like, were you just naturally good at things? Some kids are really great at sports and others are not. Which one were you? Some kids really love to learn, and others, that's not big for them. Did you feel safe as a child, so emotionally, physically, spiritually? Were you allowed to be your authentic self? Were you nurtured? Were you supported? Were you allowed to have strong emotions? Because so often we're told not to cry and not to act a certain way, right? Our emotions are squashed and we bury them and numb them. So were you emotionally coached? So did your parents ask you how you were feeling and allow you to be in that space, because so often that's not. And that's something I came realization with my son recently was, that deep emotional coaching to see things from their perspective and talk to them about it so that they feel that their emotions are honorable. And if they make a mistake, they're human. If I make a mistake, I own it and explain that to them. And I apologize and tell them why. Right? So all these things are part of that child. Were they inspired by life, that it was okay to cry? Was it okay to cry? Did they have choice, or did you have choice? Or were you always controlled? What kind of things did you look at as trauma in your life? Did you not feel deserving or worthy? Did your inner child have permission to speak, be seen? We've said that a few times, but it's a huge part of being an inner child. Your passions, were you allowed to do those things? Like, oh, you can't be a dancer. Why can't you? Why can't you do that as an adult? What were your passions? Were they squashed? You don't make any money doing those things, so you're told discouraged to be the things you love to be. It's time to find those things again. Step into the purity. Children are pure. They're innocent. They say what they're thinking. Sometimes it makes you laugh, right? So that's a reflection of all the inner child stuff, okay? So now we got some tasks. So there's a couple here. And what I will do is express and explain them now for you guys. So the inner child is a self-reflection. I want you to get a photo of yourself, one that you can connect to her face or his eyes, like see them in the eyes, look them in the eyes. Usually an age between 3 and 7 is good. Connect to that soul. Like when we look into the eyes, what do you feel? What do you see in their eyes? Hold them in your heart. What rises for you when you see that child? And how do you feel when you do that? And then you might reflect some of those other questions and reflections that I've already spoken about. So sit there and be with that little girl or little boy and see what comes up. And that's the first one I want you to do. You can even meditate with that little girl. See that little girl in your meditations. And I'll put a link below for another inner child sort of program or hypnosis type thing that they do where you can connect to the inner child. There's so many on the internet, and I haven't done a lot of them myself because I really journaled a lot with my inner child, just seen and reflected, and used the photo one. I found that was really, really powerful for me. But for the second task, I want you to close your eyes and go to them. Imagine them in front of you. Go down to their level and listen to them. Let them know that you are there. Engage with them like you would a child in the physical, right? So like I want your mind to wander in this space and imagine you meeting your little girl. And tell them the things it needs to hear. Give them permission to speak, to be seen. Tell them they're safe. Ask, what do they want to say? Do they need a cuddle? Do they want to play? Are they shy? You may need to do it a few times before they start to express. Sometimes they'll run and play hide and seek with you, but it's really because they're wanting to play with you, but they're too scared to say too much, right? So build trust with this little child and have a game, play with them. Explore the world with them. Allow their imagination to run wild like a fairy tale. So be there in that fairy tale with this little child and see what comes up. So that's the second task. First one's the photo. Second one, I want you to get down to their level and allow your mind. You can also do prospecting. So imagine them in front of you, right? I have 2 chairs. So there's a chair in front of you, and then you go drop into it and say, imagine that you are in front of you as an adult, and drop into this little child. and start letting this little child speak to you, and then do it vice versa, right? Speak to the little child. So that's an aspecting way. You can do this with your parents too. So imagine, be your little child and imagine your mum and dad in front of you. And what do you need to say? What needs to be heard? So really sit there and speak to that little child, or to your mum and dad, if that needs to be done. Not everyone needs to do that work, but sometimes we do. We have parts that we need to heal in relation to our parents, or things we needed to say to them, or vice versa, right? Let our parents be our parents and allow them to say to our inner child. So yeah, it's like using a chair in front of you and swapping roles. Okay? So you may do that if you don't want to close your eyes. The third one I'd like you to do is write a letter to them. Right? But I want you firstly I want you to write as the little girl or the little boy, using your non-dominant hand, so it's a messier writing. Just allow them to express themselves with that hand, right? So I write right-handed, so this one would be done in my left hand. My little girl is going to speak to my adult self. Leave a letter. If they could say anything, what would they say, right? What would your younger self want to say? How do they feel? What do they want to do? How do they want to express themselves? And then I would like you to give a response from your adult self to your little child. And asking what do they need to feel better? So this is like allowing two versions of yourselves to interact. And you might write a few letters back and forth till you uncover more and more that comes up, right? So other things that you might want to think of as well, so the fourth part, if you decide to, what do you feel needs to be healed? Was it loneliness, abandonment, not being heard, worthiness, judgment, rejection, abuse, trauma? What did you need from your mum and dad? What needs weren't met? Who did you crave love from the most? Who did you crave attention from? There's usually one parent there that we crave attention from. They're off working or they're too busy with the kids, right? So who was that? What was your relationship like with your parents? And what advice could you give to you to fulfill these needs from a healthy place of sovereignty? Right? So sit down and play with this inner child. Journal it, find her, see how she is in your life over the next few weeks, and bring her into action. And let her be creative, let her be abundant, let her have that prosperity, let the wild dreams be there. What do you want to do? Bring your inner child in, because this is going to bring your expression into fullness. Allow yourself to have feathers in your hair, or wear certain jewelry, or put your makeup on and wear wild colors for the day, right? Whatever it is for you. Now I'm just speaking for myself, right? But for yourself, for your inner child, what would be things that inner child wants to do before you kind of put your beliefs and society and trauma in and stop it when you put on another mask and not let yourself be seen as you. I just want you all to be you. So I hope that all makes sense. I would love for you guys to share what comes up for your inner child. Where's the inner child naturally in your life that you hadn't noticed? Where do you find that there's been areas that, your inner child was shamed or not told not to act a certain way? Can you see where, as an adult, the thing that you strive for the most was the thing you're lacking as a child? Can you see the connections in all this? I would love to hear how this helps you guys. So, that's my share for today. Love and light from Kelly.